BitBucket account and hit create. I'm going to create a new repository under my own. It's going to be the CF 2022. I'm going to call it CF Summit 2022. I always call the default branch production. And then I like to go in and make sure that the language is set to ColdFusion. I don't know who's using these statistics on what languages are being used, but I always think that it's important to promote our language of choice. So I'm going to create the repository here. Now that I have this repository created, I want to clone it locally. So I'm going to hit clone. I'm going to copy that. I'm going to go over to GitKraken, which is my repository or Git client of choice, and I'm going to say, just throw this on the desktop. Sure. Now we're cloning the repo. Bingo. Now I've got a repo created in BitBucket. Beautiful. And if I go over to that folder, you can see there's nothing in it right now. Great. All right, back to the old checklist. So I have established a repository. I've cloned it locally. Next, I'm going to create a Docker Compose within that with the following contents. Docker Compose, obviously, to be able to spin up a Docker environment locally on your machine. Now, I am running on an Apple M1. Currently, there is an issue with Apple M1 processors and the Adobe ColdFusion images. The Ortus images work just fine, but the Adobe ones don't. So you can see here, we're going to try the Adobe images and see if it works. And if they don't, then I'm gonna just keep moving forward. So we're going to start with the Adobe images. Desktop. Okay, so this is supposed to be creating the Adobe CF Docker images. Let's take a look. And there's an easy way that you can see this AMD 64. It's running under emulation because the Adobe team has not compiled these for M1 processors yet, ARM-based processors yet. And here's the easiest way to tell whether or not it's going to work. If you keep seeing this checking server startup status and it just sits there and does nothing and just repeats, that means it's broken. It's not going to work. So I'm going to stop this container and try it one more time, and then we'll switch to the Ortus images because this only works about 10% of the time. Again, on an Apple M1 processor. If you're running an Intel processor, don't worry about this. But let's see if this works up. See, CF 2021 is started. And if I get that again, then we're dead in the water. Yep, okay. So I'm going to stop that, and instead I'm going to run the, you know what, I can just do that. And let's try this again. Okay, so now I'm running on the Ortus Solutions command box images, which these are spinning up in the Docker container now. Which means I should be able to go to localhost here at any point. Now you can notice that this created a folder called app. And when it did, files in there so that we have some stuff. What I've done here is I've created an index.cfm in that app folder, and I've just put some basic stuff in here to be able to see it. So if I go back to our local, great, I've got something here that I can actually work with. So if I make a change here and say, make a change here, save that, go back to here, refresh, you notice, so now I fully have a Docker image running locally on my machine in this repository that I can make whatever changes that I want and test them locally. So I have my local development environment set up to be able to work on. Awesome. So let's say I did that. I've spun up the Docker container. I've created an index.cfml. Now that I've tested that the file is served and the changes are being reflected, beautiful. Now we are ready to dive into AWS. So the first thing that we're going to do in AWS is work on permissions. IAM, Identity Access Management. So we're going to jump over here to our AWS account that I've created for ColdFusion Summit 2022. We're going to go over to IAM. And the first thing we're going to do is we're going to create an IAM group. We're going to do three things here. We're going to create an IAM group. We're going to create an IAM user. We're going to create an IAM role. Okay. Starting with the group. Click on user groups. I'm going to do create group. I'm going to call it that. IAM create group. Name it that. And I need to grant this group access to certain things. Now, this is where Brian Class would normally have a field day on me to say you should never grant full access to all of these things because that's insanity. You don't want to give a particular group completely open access. But like I said, I threw security out the window for this in order to get it done quickly. So we are going to look for that. We're going to add it. We're going to look for that. Add it, and finally, I look for that, and guess what? We're going to add it. Okay, so I have 3 policies in there. I'm going to create that group. So I've now created the AWS Code Deploy group. What's the purpose of this? This is going to be used by AWS Code Deploy to be able to pull your code from BitBucket and post it to whatever servers you have set up. In case you're wondering, why are we doing this? Okay, so I now have the IAM group set up. Now we're going to create an IAM user. Let's bounce back over here. We're going to go to users. We're going to add a user. What did I want to name this user? What is this user doing? This user is deploying code. So we're going to call this Code Deployer. Seems like a good name for a user. I'm going to give it programmatic access. I need to make sure that it has the correct permissions. So if I go next and go to permissions, AWS Code Deploy role, AWS Code Deploy group. This is why we take copious notes. On the permissions page, select the AWS Code Deploy role to permissions. Create the user, make sure we download CSV. There we go. Make sure it has AWS Code Deploy role. I'm not going to apply any tags to this. Now, this is a very important part. When I create this user, it's going to create this access key. This is the only time that you will have access to this access key. So I'm going to make sure that I download that, and we're going to make sure that that is there. So you can see I've got my access key, I've got my secret access key, everything is beautiful. Good. Okay, so I have that file for when I need it. I've set up my permissions, I've created my user, everything's good. Now we're going to create the IAM role. Always seems like so many steps. IAM role. This over here. I'm going to create a role. I'm going to create a role for an AWS service using EC2. We got service and EC2. We're going to skip permissions for now because I'm going to add that manually. We're going to name the role AWS Code Deploy role. Then I'm going to create that role. Okay, so now I have my AWS Code Deploy role. I'm going to go back into it, and this is where I'm going to set the permissions. We're going to grant all of these permissions to it. Sorry, helps if I actually hit the add button instead of just trying to add it, view them directly. Attach that. And again, everything that we're doing here is just to make sure that the users are set up to be able to pull the code from BitBucket and post it onto that. Then I go into the trust relationships, and this is where I tell it, okay, we have access to this area. Update that policy. Awesome. Okay. So now I have created an IAM user. I've created an IAM group. I've created an IAM role. That's most of the stuff that we need to do to be able to make sure that Code Deploy can pull the code from our BitBucket and post it to the servers that we're going to create. Regarding the question that I see in the Slack here or in the channel, would it be possible to get access to the checklist? Yes, absolutely. Anybody that needs me, email me at the end. I will happily grant you access to this checklist because it has been very valuable. Okay, so now we're going to create a deployment bucket in AWS S3. How this whole thing works is that we're going to create what's called a BitBucket pipeline. What that BitBucket pipeline is going to do is whenever you push to a particular branch, it's going to take the code, it's going to create a zip file of it, and it's going to push it to AWS S3 in a specific bucket. Okay, AWS Code Deploy is going to be set up to watch for that any changes to that bucket. So when that new code comes in, it's going to say, "Oh, hey, look, new code I need to deploy." It's going to pull it, it's going to unpack it, it's going to find the server that it needs to put it on, and it's going to push that code right to it. It's pretty slick. You can even do fun things like set up load balancers, so that way it takes one out of the load balancer, pushes the code to it, brings it back into the load balancer, takes the other one out of the load balancer, pushes the code to it, brings it back into the load balancer, which is great because you can do deployments in the middle of the day and your users don't even know because it just took one server down, puts the code on it, brings it back up. But that's for another day. Let's go back to our checklist here. I am creating a deployment bucket. So we're going to go back to AWS and we're going to go to S3. I believe I did this already, just to sneak ahead and get set up because we're 20 minutes in already. Okay, I did. I created a bucket called deployment.cfsummit2022.com. Now we're going to create an EC2 instance. So I have this bucket here. There's nothing in it, you can see. It's going to get populated automatically because, like I said, this is what BitBucket is going to push to when the pipeline is deployed. So next, we're spinning up a server. So let's launch a server here. We're going to call this CF Summit 2022. I use Ubuntu instances because they're cheaper. Now, when I use Ubuntu instances, I use Ubuntu Server 20 instead of Ubuntu Server 2022. The reason for that is because Code Deploy, at least as of late, has had some issues with deploying code to Ubuntu 2022 instances. Works perfectly fine with Ubuntu 20, so I always start with that. Forgive me. Let's select an instance type here. 1 CPU and 1 gig of RAM, that's not nearly enough. This is a demo. It's only going to be running for a minute, so I might as well use something ridiculous. Let's use a 4 CPU, 16 gigs of memory. I'm going to create a new key pair. I'm going to call that key pair CF Summit 2022. What this does is it allows me to be able to use my terminal to be able to connect to the EC2 instance and authenticate. So you notice that that just downloaded, and I now have this CF Summit 2022 in my downloads. Let's go to the network settings. I'm going to allow HTTP and HTTPS on here. I'm going to allow SSH traffic from anywhere because, again, security out the window. What else do we need to know? Let's give it a little bit more hard drive space. Oh, forgive me. I've done the wrong thing there. And then the last thing that we're going to need to do is under advanced details, we're going to have to select this AWS Code Deploy role because this server is one of the ones that needs to be able to have things pushed to it. And we're going to call it CF Summit 2022. So I think all is good there. Let's check the checklist. I used Ubuntu 20. I select AWS Code Deploy role. I created a new key pair. I downloaded the PEM file. I did allow traffic because this is going to be a web server. I added more storage. I made sure that I used the AWS Code Deploy role under the advanced details. And next, we're going to launch the instance. So that is launching now. That will take a minute or two. So while it's doing that, I'm going to grab an IP address that is going to be static for it. Okay, so I'm going to bounce over here to Elastic IPs. I'm going to allocate an Elastic IP address. And bingo bango, there's my IP address for my server. Okay, let's associate that IP address with the instance that is running. This is the one that I had just created. So now I know that I have this IP address for this server. Why is that helpful? Because, like I said, I registered a domain for this session. So in Route 53, which is Amazon's DNS manager or domain manager, I can go in here and I can change the A record and say this needs to point to the IP that I just created. Let's save that. So now, technically, if I go to cfsummit2022.com, it should point to that server. Now, that server doesn't have anything running on it. It might not even be up and running yet. Let's go back and check. Nope, still initializing. So it says the instance is running, but we're going to check some things first. Let's bounce over to the terminal. Is my terminal visible and readable here? Hopefully everybody can see that properly. When you are connecting to an Amazon EC2 instance for the first time and using your newly minted certificate, you have to change the security credentials for that certificate. Okay, if I try to connect to that machine right now, let's go. It's going to yell at me and it's going to say, you can't do this because this is an unprotected private key file. So the first thing that I need to do, let's go back here. I went to Elastic IPs and I assigned an IP address. I associated that with the instance. I modified the domain to point to that. So we're going to change the permissions on this file. So now I should be able to connect to the server with no problems. Great. If you've never seen a Linux server before, this is what it looks like when you're connecting to it via terminal. So via my terminal, I am now connected to this AWS instance that is running over here. And if I were to bring up the IP address, whoops, you notice it can't connect to anything because there's no web server running on it. That server is basically an empty shell right now. So first thing I like to do, run apt update, run apt upgrade. This is basically the equivalent of a Windows update on a Linux machine. This is the exciting part of the presentation that I told you about, where we're installing crap and watching it just do stuff. Okay, so that's rolling. I've navigated to the PEM file and have changed the permissions. I've connected to the server. I've logged into a super user. I ran apt update. I ran apt upgrade. Great. Now we're going to start installing stuff. Once, the current installs are done. Let me check and see if there's any questions here while we're Nope, nothing critical to respond to quite yet. This is where Mark Takata is supposed to come back in and start singing and dancing to fill time.
Your subscription on that ran out.
What if I give you a new card? I have a new card right here.
Oh my goodness. I am filling water balloons though, so.
27 minutes in. Got 30 to go.
You got this.
I do. This is the only slow part, really, is when I'm like downloading and installing software and pressing enter 36 times to get through the end user license agreement of CF 2021.
I feel attacked.
No, don't feel attacked. Legalese, you got to do it.
No, I know.
So now we are installing Apache. So this is our web server. And just like that, this machine is now a web server. So if I go back over here and I try to go to that IP address now, you'll see, great, now I've got a web server. And since I did change the DNS on it, I should be able to go to cfsummit2022.com and see the exact same thing. So we have a server. It's up and running. It's running a web server. That web server is responding to requests. All is well. I have installed Apache. Now, the default site, we're not going to want to use that default site, so I'm going to disable it. Then I'm going to create a new site that will handle our, our code here. So I just did that. Let me paste this in here, save it, and then I'll show you exactly what I did. So what I've done here is, by default, Apache is going to install itself into a directory called, or I should say the website files are going to be in /var/www/html. I have removed that because normally I have more than one website running on a single machine. Sometimes you only have one website running on a machine. Sometimes you have multiple. So I put them in their own directories. So I've removed the default HTML directory, and I've created a directory specifically for Summit 2022 here. And then this is the configuration file that is going to set that up. So if let's clear this, and go to the www directory, you can see there's my folder, and there's nothing in it, which is why when I go back, I should probably restart Apache. Let's follow the instructions that I have carefully crafted. Wondrous. Okay, so now we should have a empty website there. If I go to CF Summit, whoops, I go to CFSummit2022.com, reload this, you notice it's now an empty directory. If I go back into that and go touch index.cfm, nano index, and oh my God. Create a complex application there. You notice it doesn't do anything. Why? I haven't installed ColdFusion yet, right? All this is a web server at this time. So let's go back to the instructions. We did the configuration. Now we're going to install AWS Code Deploy. And again, this is one of those things where you're watching code being installed. It's kind of boring. AWS Code Deploy does require Snap, and it does require Ruby. Once that's done, we're going to get the latest Code Deploy agent. Great. Now I've got the latest version of the Code Deploy agent on the local machine. And now I can install it. Now, later on in this presentation, when I'm setting up the application in Code Deploy, it will have an option to be able to install the Code Deploy agent onto the machine. I've had mixed results with that. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. So I always take this step to make sure that the Code Deploy agent is up and running on the machine before I do anything. And how you do that is you then, once it's installed, you fire off this and you can see it is active and running. So what have we done? We have spun up an AWS EC2 instance. We have now installed Apache. And now we're going to install the Code Deploy agent. Now we're going to install software that's called CertBot. CertBot is software that is created by the Electronic Frontier Foundation to be able to install secure certificates on websites for free. So if you're not using SSL on a website and or you are paying for an SSL certificate, don't be a sucker. Just do this instead. And then if I fire certbot-apache, it's going to say, hey, I don't know what the hell you're doing. It's because it's certbot, I think, --apache. Or that's a smart dash. That's what's going on. Oh, come on. Core's already installed. CertBot's already installed. There we go. Okay. So, CertBot, again, free secure certificates. I need an email address. Let's do David at CF. Do I agree to the terms of service? Yes. Do I want to be spammed? No. This is where it's going to say, okay, which website do you want to activate HTTPS for? I've already configured CFSummit2022.com on this server, so I can just hit 1. It's going to request a certificate. It's going to automatically install it, and then it's going to come back and say, okay, you're good to go. Great. So now, if I go back to my happy little website here, you notice right now, not secure. Reload the page. Now I've got my secure certificate. Everything is good. Now, the thing about secure certificates issued by CertBot or Electronic Frontier Foundation or Let's Encrypt is that they're only good for 90 days. However, when I installed CertBot, it automatically installs an agent that says 60 days from now, go get me another certificate. And every 60 days, it'll just keep renewing it. So this is basically fire and forget secure certificates, which are amazing. So we have installed certbot. We've installed Apache. We have our web server. We know it's working. We know it's secure. So now I can install ColdFusion. Oh, awesome. Did I not set that up? Stand by. Let's go to my S3, see where I stored it. Again. There we go. I must have had something wrong in there. So let me go back to my documentation and I will update that. Great. You notice that downloaded a little bit over a gig in just under a few seconds, 12 seconds, because this is Amazon downloading the file locally from Amazon S3. So it's already a pretty quick process. That file needs to be executable. Let's try chmod genius. And now we execute it. Everybody has installed ColdFusion before, I'm assuming. If you've never done it on a Linux server, you get this where you have to press enter over and 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 over again until you get to the end. Hey, look at that. It's 36 times if you're ever wondering. We're going to install the developer edition because this is temporary. We're going to install server configuration. I'm going to say this is a development server. And again, development profile, because we're throwing security out the window. I'm going to install everything. Sure, use that username. What do we want to do is it's CF Summit 2022. Install the default folder. We're going to pretty much use everything as default here. I'm not even going to set up a user to be able to do it because, like I said, we're just going to kind of fire through this as quickly as we can. Oh, of course. I'm not going to enable RDS. I do want server updates. And yay. Now we're waiting for ColdFusion to install. I'm going to check. Certbot does use Let's Encrypt, yes. You don't like my cfmod command there, Takata? Come on, that's brilliant. So what are our next steps? Once we have ColdFusion installed, I need to start it up, obviously. I need to run the web server configuration tool to make sure that ColdFusion is then responding to requests for CFM files. And then we're going to prove that the server is now serving CFML. Yeah, I already did these ones. Yay, okay, so ColdFusion is now installed. Let's pop over to, well, first let's follow the instructions and hit enter. Let's pop over to there. Let's start up ColdFusion. Once ColdFusion 2021 is running, we should be good to go. Now, let's bounce. Oh, I didn't do the web server connector. Let's do the web server connector. Always follow the rules. Should be good to go. Apache got restarted. Connector got installed. I should be able to come over here. And now I see the timestamp that I'm expecting to see. So I have proven that the domain is connected to the IP address. The IP address is connected to the server. We have secure server installed on all requests. ColdFusion is installed, and it is processing CFML pages wonderfully. Everything is going well so far. I better knock wood, right? Just for fun, let's do this. Bounce back over here, and you can see ColdFusion running CF Server 2021. Good to go. Great. Now we're going to set up AWS Code Deploy. So we're going back into AWS. We're going to use a new service called Code Deploy. First thing that we're going to do when we're in Code Deploy is we're going to create an application. By going over here to the applications link, we're going to click Create Application. I'll give you 3 guesses what we're going to call this. This is going to be an EC2 on-premises application. We're going to create that. The application itself really is just a container. All it is it's a bucket that allows you to be able to create deployment groups. These deployment groups are what's going to listen to the BitBucket pipeline, listen to that AWS S3 bucket that I created earlier to be able to hold the code. So, name the application, select EC2 on premises, created it. Now we're going to create what's called a deployment group. So I'm going to create deployment group. We're going to give it a group name. AWS Code Deploy role. And this is actually the Code Deploy role that I created earlier in IAM. Okay, now when I created my EC2 instance, when I created the server that I'm running, I gave it a name. So here I'm going to select that the code that I'm going to deploy is any server with the name CF Summit 22. If you have multiple servers running, you could have this go to multiple servers all at the same time, or through a load balancer doing taking things out of deployments and being able to deploy them individually. But for this instance, I only have the one server. It's our production server. So I'm saying when a code deploy happens, when a deployment happens, these are the ones that you're going to deploy to. I could create separate applications with separate deployment groups, one deployment group for beta, one deployment group for production. Maybe your production has 2 or 3 servers. Maybe your production has 100 servers, doesn't matter. You could set it up however you'd like. I always disable the load balancing when it's a single server because we're not using load balancing. And then create the deployment group. Great. Now we've got an application. We've got a deployment group. Everything's coming up roses. So now, with 15 minutes left, here's where we tie it all together. Okay. Now I'm going to go back into my code here, and I'm going to actually open the folder really quick. Okay. In my folder, you can see I've got my Docker Compose, which is what I was toying with earlier. I've got my app folder, which has my CFML files. Everything's good there. But I'm going to create a new document at the top called appspec.yml. Okay. What this is the file that AWS is going to use to know how to deploy this code. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to tell it the operating system is Linux. The source is going to be all of the files in the app folder, and the destination is going to be the destination on my Linux server that I created earlier. Remember, I said I got rid of the default HTML folder and I created a CF Summit 2022 folder. So this way it knows, grab anything that's in the app folder, and push it to that CF Summit 2022 folder. Save that appspec.yml file. When that gets pushed to the repository, Code Deploy is going to pick that up and it's going to say, oh, okay, I know what to do here. There's many more things you can do with it. Code Deploy is pretty powerful. So this is, again, very, very basic. So I have my appspec.yml. Now we're going to create what's called a BitBucket pipelines.yml. This is the actual pipeline that is going to be used by BitBucket. And I'll kind of walk through what it does. New file, call it it is in the root. I'm going to paste what we're doing here. So here's what I've got going on here. Whenever I push to production, there's going to be two steps, or one step that gets involved, two pipelines. The first one is going to, so basically what a BitBucket pipeline is it spins up a virtual machine and it runs a series of commands. So you can see here what I'm telling it to do is update itself, go ahead and install zip, recursively zip called CF Summit 2022 production.zip, and then use the pipeline to be able to throw that onto this application with this zip file into this S3 bucket. Okay. Now you can see some things going on here like, hey, these look like variables. Where do I get these? Where do I set these? Those are very important. The second thing this is going to do is it's then going to tell the application to deploy from that S3 bucket. Okay. Let's get back to these variables really quick though. So I'm saving my BitBucket pipelines.yml file. So now BitBucket knows what to do with our code. So the last thing that we need to do is we need to create the repository variables. And these came from that CSV file that I downloaded earlier. So if I grab these, let's make it a little larger so I can see it. I'm going to bounce back here into BitBucket. I'm going to close this. I'm going to go into the repository settings. And first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go into the pipelines. When I go to create a pipeline, it's going to say, you can't do this. The reason you can't do this, where was I doing that? Sorry. Where was I enabling pipelines? Forgive me. This is why we pack extra time in here. There we go. When you go to your repository settings and go to create repository variables, it's going to scream at you and say pipelines must be enabled before you can do this. When you go to your settings, all you need to do is turn them on. BitBucket is free. There are paid versions. With the free version, you only get 50 minutes of deployment per month. Paid version, I think, is $15 a month for 5 developers, and it gets you a lot, basically as many deployments as you could ever imagine to use. So then I go back into my repository variables. These are variables that I am setting up that are going to be used in the code. Let me bounce back over to my code really quick. So you can see I have the AWS access key. Obviously, we don't want that stored in our code. The secret access key, obviously, we don't want that stored in our code. So instead, we use what are called secure repository variables. So the first one that I'm going to create is this AWS access key ID. And I'm going to give it the value of this. And it is secured. Obviously, you can not secure it if you want, but don't do that. So that we're at least have a little bit of security in this presentation. I'm going to do the same thing with a secret access key. And let's grab that. That's good. And finally, the default region, which for me, I don't leave that one secured just because I don't think it's that important to know whether or not, to have it secured that, hey, guess what? My server's in California. Okay, so now we have our repository variables set up. We have our AWS pipeline set up. Our appspec.yml set up. We have our BitBucket pipeline set up. Everything is coming up good. So now, again, let's review and say, here's my CF Summit 2022 running on my local host. Okay. Here's my CF Summit 2022 running on my server. Let's do a push. Within BitBucket on the production branch, I'm going to stage all these. Never push directly to production. Learn to type. Hello. Why isn't this? Stand by. Let me relaunch, get cracking. For some reason, Get Kraken decided to have a stroke and wouldn't accept any of my keyboard input. Okay. Commit those files, push them. Now, quickly, I'm going to run over here to BitBucket, look at my repository, look at my pipelines, and I will see that a pipeline is currently in progress. I can click on this and I can watch what it is doing. So right now it is spinning up a virtual machine. It's then going to install zip on it. It's going to zip that file. It's going to push that file over here to, hopefully, my deployments bucket, and then from Code Deploy, we're going to see a deployment that will have happened. Okay, so let's go back over to BitBucket. You can see what's happening here. It's spinning up, it's doing its thing. There's my apt update. After this, it should install zip. Then it's going to take everything in that app folder, which is nothing, and it's going to zip it up. And then it's going to push. Oh, we died. Why did we die? Oh, because it doesn't have access to the repository. Again, let's throw security completely out the window. Don't want to block all public access. This is awful because now it means that my code is going to be public. But for the sake of this test, let's go back to our pipelines. And you'll notice that we got this failed. So I can say run pipeline. What do you mean it's disabled? Pipelines. Run pipeline. Run the production pipeline. Go ahead. Let's try this again. And you notice these numbers will increment here. Each time that you do a pipeline push, it's going to give it a number, which is kind of handy because in here, in the bucket, there should be a number associated with that pipeline push with that zip file. The great thing about that is that then you could go to code deploy. Say, for example, you push some code that went badly. You could go to code deploy and say, roll this back to this particular deployment. Let's see. Any questions while we're waiting? Nope, we're still failing. What have I got going on wrong? The problem is always in IAM. Let's look at my user. Let's look at my code deployer user. I have EC2 full access. I have code deploy full access. I have S3 full access. Don't tell me we're going to fail before the time runs out. I've only got 4 minutes. My group is there. Sorry, not that. Don't add user to a group. I want to do this on the group. Permissions. Let's add permissions. Well, for sake of not looking bad, let's don't ever do this. Oh, damn, got too many policies attached.
Saving you from yourself.
Are you?
No, it is.
Yeah. I am missing something here.
So Paul suggested IAM for repos and add existing policies. I'm not sure which Paul that is. Is that Paul Kukio by any chance?
IAM for repos.
Paul Metz. Oh, okay.
I'm sure I'm missing a permission here somewhere. It's either, it might be in the role, actually, AWS Code Deploy role. Hate that. It looks so editable. Let's try that. See what happens. We all got time, right? Rerun the pipeline.
Yep. 1 minute exactly.
Yeah, I know. Sorry. This is where those water balloons come in.
Mm-hmm. Don't look up.
So when I did this session at Summit, I finished up in 50 minutes and got done and went over to my wife and was like, holy crap, it all worked the first time. Like, I'll never be able to do that again. And here's the proof.
I don't know. I feel like whenever I play in the Amazon waters, I always run into something along these lines and just have to roll my face across the keyboard until things work and deploy properly.
Yeah. And I'm sure I'm missing one little thing Hopefully it's this particular little thing. Nope, still doesn't like it.
Put object operation.
It doesn't like the push. Use execute that. Let me make sure I'm not missing anything on my code. It is deploymentcfsummit2022.com. Where's my S3? Deployment.cfsummit2022.com. What do you think of this?
Oh, God. No. What are you doing?
I am throwing security straight out the window. Why can't I add write access? I can do list, I can do read. Log delivery group, yeah, that's fine. Bucket owner, I'm the bucket owner. But this, I don't want to block all public access. That's fine. Publicly accessible, but not publicly writable. This is why we throw security out the window, is to troubleshoot issues like this.
I do feel like Amazon makes things sort of so complicated in some cases that we start getting
You're not
desperate.
wrong there. I mean, it's when you say you're not allowed to do anything unless you explicitly say that you're allowed to do it, then it can cause problems. And of course, Google's always our friend.
I definitely feel like Amazon could leverage some of its computing power in doing some sort of AI-driven permissions thing where you can just tell it, I want to write using a pipeline to this folder, and then it would suggest that,
And therein lies the challenge, because the permissions always are so challenging. I have my group. It's got S3 full access, Code Deploy full access, EC2 has full access to be able to access everything. I'm missing something. I hope I don't fail in this presentation, because I am not showing good information here. What would be causing this?
Do you have to explicitly let AWS know that it's coming from BitBucket? Is there some kind of two-way?
No, that's because AWS never explicitly pulls from BitBucket. BitBucket pushes to AWS S3. Once AWS S3 sees something drop into that folder, that's when it let me make sure I didn't miss anything here. Is there anything I didn't check off? Did all that. Oh, wait. Yeah, I did that. Did all that. Ran all those. I have the deploy group. I have the IAM user. I have the role. should be fine. Should is a very evil word. So in the meantime, I'm going to
Yeah, doing live code demos is always, no matter how many times we've done the stupid thing.
Boring and awful, and proves that I'm not as good as I think that I am.
No, that's not true at all. It's always something. It's like never do live demos with code, kids, or pets.
Yeah, of course. I'm going to bounce up another repository just for the sake of showing that it works. Because this way I can at least show what's happening in BitBucket, what's happening in AWS. So allow me to bounce accounts really quick. Clearly I have way too many AWS names. So in this particular one, you can see that I've got this push happening right now. This is the way that it's supposed to work. And then you'll see it happening here. So here within AWS Code Deploy, if I look at my deployments, I will see one happening right now. If I click on it, you can see the events that happen. It stopped the application, it downloaded the code, it ran a before install, then it installed it, then it ran an after install event, restarted the application, and then validated the service. This is the way it's supposed to work, you know, when I'm not failing at troubleshooting live systems. If I look at my deployments for that, you can see there's my code that just got pushed. So believe me, it does work if you have the permissions set up all properly. And then what you happen to see is instead of seeing this, you would see this. I'm going to troubleshoot this offline, but the important thing is to at least show what's going on with the deployment pipeline. The fact that the deployment pipeline does run and then pushes that to that, and that's when this AWS Code Deploy pipeline takes over and tells it, go grab this code, install it on that server, you're good to go.
So we're just going to call this one a tie between you and AWS.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Like I said, I'm gonna troubleshoot it offline, and I'll follow up with anybody that asks what I did wrong to be able to miss the permissions.
So we did have a few questions. I'm going to kind of jump through here. They probably have scrolled up a little bit. So Jim Rathburn asks, as long as we're not using this with any IP we care about, any idea how long it would take to secure this implementation? So you just kind of went, hog wild, no security out the window type stuff. But if you were doing this in a secure manner, how much do you think it would add for time?
Probably another, well, it's difficult to say because clearly something in the security settings was not set properly, and it's blocking me from getting this demonstration done in time. That being said, under normal circumstances, if I had gone through this whole thing and it had launched properly, it'd probably take me another 20, 30 minutes to lock it down. Because it's just a matter of, instead of having the S3 full access and AWS full access and any other kind of full access, um, it then just goes to, you lock it down to whatever is needed. So probably another 20, 30 minutes.
Cool. That's not bad. I thought you were going to say like 20, 30 hours.
No, it's just a matter of removing permissions and specifying explicit permissions based on what the application is doing.
Awesome. And I think there was one other. This is not a question. It's more of an ask. Josh was asking and Paul was asking about sharing the updated checklist and then also your YAML files.
Yes, absolutely. I will include the YAML files. The code for the YAML files are actually in that checklist as well. I have it all just sitting there. So yes, anybody that needs to get access to this checklist, I'm happy to send it off, and I'll let you know when it gets fixed with the proper permissions. Awesome. David at cfsummit2022.com or David at codemonkey.studio.
Cool. All right. And you just answered that question for John. Cool. Did we have any other questions for David?
Sorry, it didn't work.
It's all good. Dude, my first in-person CF Summit talk, my code broke like 20 minutes in, and I just like,
I remember that.
I did smoke bomb, man. I was like,
yeah,
no idea. Yeah, and I made sure I practiced that like 1,000 times between then and the next one. It happens.
Yeah.
It could be something like with YAML too. It could be something dumb, like a space or something is in the wrong spot, and the error you get is completely useless because AWS is not going to be helpful.
Well, and under normal, and believe me, I'm going to bulldog onto this until I get it figured out. But I'm not going to bore everybody, while I'm sitting here troubleshooting accessibility on AWS S3 buckets. That's boring as hell. We got better things to do with our time.
Awesome. Well, I want to thank you, David. This was awesome. I mean, I learned like so much all the way through there, and I'm just ignoring if the last step doesn't work, there's still every other step that you went through that absolutely did work. And I know you got this done because I was at Summit. So you definitely, for whatever reason it worked at Summit, didn't work here, but who cares? It's all good. Yeah. So thank you very much. Thank you all for coming and watching and spending your afternoon with us here in virtual land. And David, we're going to be posting your presentation up after all the online summit stuff is around. Do you have a GitHub that you normally put stuff to? Or?
I don't have a GitHub that I normally post stuff to. It's all private stuff.
Cool. Right on. Awesome. All right. Well, I'm going to stick around for a little bit in case there's any other questions. We've got more online summit stuff coming next week, I think is the next one, or there might be one coming up the next few days. I'll be hosting another one next week. And yeah. Awesome.
Yeah. Sounds like a plan. Thanks, Mark. Cool. Thanks for having me.
Hey, thanks, David. Yeah, I'll stick around for a little bit and then I'll kick everyone out in about 15 minutes or so. So if you want to stick around and chat, we can keep doing that. Or if you've got better things, I'll stick around. Cool.
I got nothing for another 45 minutes.
Cool. JF asks if you could put the emails that you had verbally said in the chat. Awesome. Thank you. Yeah, I kind of, so someone just said you could pre-record your demo and just kind of like talk over it. I've actually done that. It's very strange as a presenter to do that. And I kind of get it because like, it's going to work. But at the same time, people are like, how is he doing that without moving?
Yeah, and believe me, there was no lack of practice prior to doing this, both for CF Summit and for today. I was like, yeah, I've got that presentation next week. I should run through this. I ran through it twice last night, and it worked flawlessly. So I missed a step or did something wrong.
So Lou asks CF Summit or CF Summit 2022. I think wasn't it David at CF Summit 2022?
Oh, yes. My apologies.
Good catch, Lou. I didn't catch that. By the way, our lawyers will be in touch over that URL.
I'm happy to give it to you.
I'm just
take it over at any time. I only did it for Summit.
I think I grabbed devweek2021.com or something at one point because for whatever reason Adobe folks just don't want to like grab URLs because there's too much paperwork. And then they noticed in all their metrics that like, and all I did was just like punt that into their thing, which was on adobe.com. And they're like, why are we getting all this traffic from dev? Wait, who owns that? And I'm like, gosh, I wonder who that could be.
Yes. Yeah, they didn't bother buying the domain, but they did check the metrics.
Oh yeah, they definitely do.
Guys. They're pretty smart.
Pipeline is blaming your Apple M1, which I did not blame. By the way, I wanted to.
So be it. You know, I was talking to Mark before the presentation, and I said, the people ask me all the time, "Are you a Mac guy or a PC guy?" And I say, "I'm a computer guy." You know, they're tools. Use what works for you.
Totally. Have you had a chance? Speaking of computers and like sort of random, have you played with a Steam Deck yet?
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Have you got? Yeah. Okay. Do you have CF running on it?
No.
Okay.
But I don't own one. A buddy of mine had one, and he brought it over when we had a bunch of friends over for Thanksgiving, and he brought it over, and I was like, oh, I could do some stuff with this.
Yeah, I am in the works of making that my like travel presentation machine.
Yep.
So I can travel with it and just plug it in wherever I go.
Oh, that's half brilliant.
Yeah, it's super light, great. I mean, the thing's powerful.
Oh yeah.
And it runs, the battery lasts a long time. It's kind of amazing. Mike Peters from New Zealand asks, "Hi Mark and David, is there a way to use CFML generated output as the automatic CLI input into a CLI client or server?"
CF execute, right?
Yeah, I mean, you'd CF execute, or I guess you could, depending on what you were running it into, you could run it as like a nightly task. But yeah, you'd probably still have to CF execute against some CLI that you were running, or run a different page that's running something else elsewhere using the ColdFusion as the trigger. I mean, yeah, it's possible. I don't know that many people do that too much, but
yeah, I haven't seen a whole lot of need for CF execute as of late, but
yeah, I see people using it for image magic a lot. That's been the big one. Or occasionally they're using like some of the PDF generation stuff to avoid the problems that we have with the current HTML to PDF, which is going away because our engine has been updated for 2021.
I saw your 2023 presentation and was like, oh, that's going to be exciting.
It's awesome. Yeah, I am so happy about that. That's like my main thing. People are, everyone internally is like, oh, how's the testing going on this other thing? And I'm like, I'm not doing that crap. I'm doing the PDF stuff. That's what I care about. Like, no, you got to do like messaging on Google. I'm like, okay, I guess I'll go do that. That's less fun, but sure.
All right. Any other questions that I can answer while we're here?
Mike Peters said, I was thinking of using a workflow to run something remote via CLI. Yeah, I don't... Mike, what that sounds like is an automation framework, like Automation Anywhere, which CF just doesn't have that directly. I mean, you could probably, if a framework of that sort had an API, you could hit that API Jenkins with... Exactly. Yeah. Or that's more of like a Jenkins thing than CF. But
Jenkins is a jenkins-ci.org, I believe.
I think so.
Yes. Jenkins-ci, or sorry, it's jenkins.io now.
Oh, everybody's .io now.
Everybody's going IO. So Jenkins is a continuous integration, continuous delivery platform. that, as I recall, does have an API. So in theory, you could create an automation platform or an automation workflow that's using CLI commands in Jenkins or Travis.
Yeah, and I believe Brian Sape has a CI/CD talk where he actually uses Jenkins as part of the stack. So if you check out youtube.com/Adobe ColdFusion, I think we've got his talk on there from last Dev Week, maybe. If not, I can ask and see if he can record one of those for us, because
Yeah, and
John says he missed the last part where you fix the access permission. Yeah, that didn't actually happen yet, but stay tuned.
That didn't
John.
actually happen.
Yeah, we just
I'll have to post that along with
hand waving. We did a little movie magic there, John. Yes. Just pretend it worked. And it did work in the past, so we know that we know David knows
sad.
his stuff. I know, I hate that. I hate when you're like, that's just the worst, and you're like, oh no, like I don't belong here, but no, you do.
Right awesome, at the end.
You're awesome, David. Well, at least it didn't fail at the beginning, right? Like, right. That's the worst. When you're just like, you're ready. You're going on
the hiccups that I had along the way. You know, I tracked down really quick. Okay, no big deal. But then you get into permission denied. Okay, now you've got a project.
Right, and you're like, permission denied. Why? Permission denied. Yeah. Oh, okay, that's very useful. Thank you, AWS.
Yeah, but seriously, email me. I'll explain exactly what it is that I fixed, and I'm going to actually get going and get cracking on that now.
Awesome. Well, cool. Well, thanks again, David. Thanks everyone for coming. I'm going to shut this whole whiz bang thing down, and stay tuned for more CF Summit online stuff. We'll be having Dev Week in the summer. We might have something in the spring. Don't forget Into the Box early next year. Everybody should go to that. Yeah, very cool. What's that?
Don't forget CF Camp is coming back.
CF Camp. Oh, I know. I may have to pay out of pocket for that one, but I'm going. I don't care.
Head over to Germany. Yeah.
Yeah, it's been a minute. 30 years. Since 32 years. I'm sorry. I forgot it was 48. 32 years since I was in Germany. Never been to a CF camp, obviously, because they haven't been going for 32 years.
Right, exactly. If they've had CF camp going for 32 years, they've got a time machine.
Yes, exactly. And the Allaire brothers owe them money.
Yes.
For stealing
their product. All right, everyone. I appreciate it. Sorry that it didn't work out in the very end, but I will get that fixed and send out an update with information on what it was that I missed.
Very cool. All right.
Thanks, all.